And so, yeah, this presentation by myself and Saka, who's going to come up and do the second half of the presentation. So we're going to be talking about translanguaging as a socially just pedagogy. We've been working on a course, it's DOH 1010, it's Text in the Humanities. It's one of the introductory courses for students on the extended degree programs in the humanities faculty. And we've been introducing various forms of translanguaging pedagogy in the course. So we're just going to introduce you to some of the work that we've been doing. And our argument is that translanguaging is a socially just pedagogy. So social justice involves investigating barriers to students' learning outcomes and using teaching and assessment strategies fairly. And Cumming Potvin, who wrote about social justice, said that one of the tenets in terms of pedagogy is that students shouldn't be impacted negatively by discrimination through sex, language, culture, ethnicity, religion, or disability. And obviously in the UCT context, we can see that students are negatively impacted by the English as the language of instruction. Language discrimination in the academy, just to sort of set the scene a little bit. Carolyn McKinney has done quite a bit of work on this, but the idea of the monolingual norm, so the context of a single language mapped onto a nation state, and obviously in this context in South Africa, in Africa more generally, monolingualism is not the norm. I think Neville Alexander said that multilingualism is the African lingua franca. So the context of South Africa, it's a multilingual country. And then the dominance of English. Obviously there are assumptions about the requirement for English in order to access the global work, employment and so on. And and just the dominance of English within South Africa in terms of institutions, politics and so on. Ideas about language purity come through, so this idea that there's a pure form of English, isiXhosa, Afrikaans, and there's no such thing as language purity. Languages, they have grown from impure origins. Languages they're developmental. This idea of correct grammar as well, that there's one correct English. Again, it's a sort of it's a hegemonic view that has been reproduced, but there's no such thing as a correct grammar. There are lots of different types of English around the world as well. And then standardization, whose version becomes standard, and obviously this reproduces sort of power hierarchies. So as students, we've done quite a bit of work with them over the last few years, and we do something called a language history at the start of the course, and students talk about their experiences of language through school, from very small age up to university. And a lot of the things that came through, there was this notion that African languages and certain varieties of Afrikaans are inferior kinds of language. So you can see some of the quotes here. English never changes how I feel about my language. It just makes me undermine my intelligence as I speak English poorly. And then the second one there, I always questioned the fact that my home language wasn't offered at school. Sadly, this influenced the idea that my own language was perhaps not as good as other languages. One is perceived as not intelligent if they don't know how to speak English. And then my home language, again, it's neglected and inferior. And the last one, my home language is a nice and easy language. I feel that it's a good inferior language. And I feel when I lose it, I lose my identity. So this kind of reproduction of the idea that English is superior to other languages. So the idea of translanguaging in terms of being a way of combating these sort of the Anglo-normativity in the academy. So translanguaging it was explained in an earlier presentation as well, but it's the ability of, Williams was one of the first people to write about it, the ability of speakers to shuttle between languages and treating the diverse languages that form their repertoire as an integrated system. So it looks at all of your language resources, your full repertoire, and you can choose resources from across that repertoire, regardless of whether we say it's from English or isiXhosa or Afrikaans. Kanagaraja wrote a really good book on translingual practice, and he talks about translingual practice involving complex communicative strategies, including, and these are terms around crossing, so moving from a majority to minority language for identity purposes, code meshing rather than code switching, so merging of different languages together, polyglot dialogue, plurilingualism, and they talk about functional competence in partial languages, which is something that can be analysed as well. But the idea is that you don't have to know the whole of a language. You can choose resources and partial parts of language and still have communicative excellence, So the idea is that all language resources are equal, and you can merge languages across your full repertoire. So several people have worked in the field of translanguaging in terms of pedagogies. Leketi Makalele, who's up at Wits, I think, he's done work on encouraging, University of, I can't remember. I think he might be UJ. But he encourages students to cross between all known languages in multilingual classroom contexts. So he's used languages within the classroom, translanguaging within the classroom. I spoke about Kanagaraja's work, and he's used translanguaging in essay writing. And then Bulu Ndiba, who was here, I think he might have gone, he's done work on concept glossaries. And he's sort of helped students to develop terminology in African languages through translingual discussions in the classroom, and also he's helped us doing some online concept glossary development as well. So we've implemented a number of these different pedagogies in our course in order to respond to social justice issues. So the course, as I said, it's DH 1010 Text in the Humanities. It's part of the extended 4-year degree. What the aim of the course is to teach discourse analysis, genre analysis, visual analysis, and critical argument. And we're building these skills so that students can then succeed in their majors, in the different majors. Our course is really focused on the BA side of the humanities degree programs. And there's another course that emphasises the BSOC side of things. We have around 80 students per year. I think we've got 86 signed up for this year. We started using a multilingual essay submission in 2015, so I'm going to show you some of that data. Basically, we told students they can submit essays in any language that they want, and in a mix of languages, so there were no sort of restrictions on what language they could use and mix in the essay submissions. And we also brought that into the lectures, into the lab tasks, and all assignment submissions by 2016. So now basically students can submit at every aspect of the course except the examination in whatever language they want, or mix of languages. And then last year we added assignment and online task instructions in Afrikaans and isiXhosa. Obviously, we're restricted in the number of languages that we can use for instructions. So again, we're sticking with Western Cape dominant languages. Okay, so quickly some examples of translanguaging in the essays. So here's one the student starts out, I'm a 20-year-old Swazi girl. I'm infused with so many lingos, but can only praat tale. My name and surnames are Siswati. She goes on talking about people mistake her for Xhosa, Zulu, or even Tswana. And then halfway down the second paragraph there, she switches. So I was born and raised in the land of Eswatini by my eccentric great-grandparents who valued culture and education. And then manjike ngikule, sorry, my accent is terrible, ngikle tonke, te shlobe, te bidvo, and so on. She starts talking about food that she grew up eating. And obviously the switch, then you can see it as a sort of drawing on cultural resources that are less accessible to her in English. And, you know, we had a little bit of trouble translating those foods into English, actually, because, yeah, some of them are very specific to the Swati culture and the foods that she grew up eating. So we've got meat, pap, peanuts, pumpkins, butternuts, and ngeke. Another example, so this is from an isiXhosa speaker. My language is a perfect reflection of who I am. My language, my image. NdiXhosa, ndithethe isiXhosa kwaye ndiyazingca ngelwimi lwam lonkwanti. This paper will conduct a study of how language has had an impact on me. And then the last sentence there, I think, is really nice. isiXhoseni, we usually say, umuntu ngubanye abantu. Nanditi umuntu ngumuntu ngulwimi lwakhe. I hope that was